Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Kirtana and I work as a project manager at AccuKnox, and I'll be a moderator for today. I'm joined by my colleague Nikhil, who works as a solution engineer and who's been closely working on today's agenda, which is Kubernetes security and entitlement management. We call it as KIEM. So, we are really excited to walk you through a powerful solution that basically addresses one of the most common, let's say, a critical challenge in Kubernetes, if you're dealing with Kubernetes, which is understanding and managing the entire RBAC, which is role based access control. So, Kubernetes Identity Entitlement Management is basically designed to bring you complete clarity and control over role based access control. So, it builds basically a live interactive graph for all your RBAC entities to just set you the context before we go into the webinar. So, yeah, so in today's session, we'll give you a quick tour of all the KIM core capabilities, explore real world use cases, and of course, we answer your questions live as well. So, feel free to drop them your question answers in the Q&A section as we go forward. And yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to Nikhil to walk us through how KIM actually works and how it can fit into the audience's security strategy.
Right. Thank you, Kirtana. And hey, guys. And I'll be taking through the slide deck, right? And webinar, of course, right? So let's get started, right? So when we are talking about K8s or Kubernetes, right? So here's the reality, right? Kubernetes are back is great in theory, right? But once you hit production, it becomes a bit of a black box, right? Admins are juggling users, service account groups, rules, and role bindings, right? And it only takes one drift, one misconfiguration rule, right? And suddenly you've got access paths no one planned for, right? That's an issue. And then entities start piling up over time. Excessive permission builds up, not intentionally but gradually, right? So eventually you hit the $1 million questions, right? Who can access what? Which honestly, it's incredibly hard to answer with confidence. And not the meme here, it might be funny, right? But if you have ever tried to trace r back in a production in cluster, right? It's too real, right? In cybersecurity, there is a saying that you can't secure what you can't see, and that's exactly where most team finds themselves in with our K8s are back right today. So talking about why traditional tools fall short. Right. So here's the thing. Now, first, metrics are not security. There is a major misconception, right? Like metrics are equal to security, but the thing is, metrics are helpful, right? They are great for performance monitoring, but the issue is they don't tell you who has the access to what. kubectl, for example, or YAML might be fine in dev environments, right? But when you are dealing with large live clusters, they simply don't scale. Right. Second part, logs are reactive, right? They show you what happened after the fact, but seams are like for seam tool, right? Are they are excellent for let's say getting alerts, right? But they aren't actually built to explain how rules, bindings, identity actually relate, right? So if you're trying to understand, let's say why something had access, they fall short there, right? And most tools they just dump raw text, no relationship, no context, or no structure. But what you really need is interactive visibility, and you need let's say you need an ability to search, filter, graph, or let's say audit access in a way that makes sense, right? Because when we are dealing with this RBAC, right, that's a major issue there. And not in YAML files, but in a way which is like uh, in a way humans can understand, right? Actually reason about that. So that's how you bring RBAC under control in production, right? And talking about let's say KIEM, right? Kubernetes Identity and Entitlement Management, right? So what it brings to table is, think of KIM as an RBAC X-ray, right? It takes all the complexity and puts it out visually, right? You get a graph of all the RBAC entities and their relationship. So you can see exactly how permissions are flowing across your cluster. Also, it's fully text searchable, right? You can put in your text and then search it based on that. And critically, it helps with auditing purpose, right? And if you want to reduce some permissions, you can also use that. And also you can find excessive roles, orphaned accounts, or unintended privilege chains, right? And take action on it, of course, right? So KIM puts structures around RBAC, so you can move from guessing to knowing the issue, and then from reactive to proactive security, right?
Yeah. So, Nikhil, I think
Hmm.
this feature is one of my favorite one to be able to see graphically of what we have. So,
Right.
I'm just curious here, like how can we decide what service account permissions that we can assign to somebody?
I
How
mean,
do
it.
we do that?
I mean, it depends on the scenario or the use case, but usually the general method is, first of all, you understand what the specific task that service account needs to perform, right? If it's a job, or let's say a deployment, or a specific controller, right? It depends based on the use case, and then you identify the resource on which the service account need to access, and which actions, I mean, you need to take, right? Either it's let's say get or list or create or delete, right, a particular resource. So lastly, what you need to do is scope out the permission. Let's say either it can be namespace wide or cluster wide, it depends, right, based on the use case. But usually I've seen namespace specific are like most preferable when we are dealing with multiple tenants, right? So that's how you like go about it, right? Any questions?
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe you
All right.
can take our audience through the actual core capabilities of what KIM can do, more than just the graphical view and the entities and relationships.
Yeah, makes sense, makes sense. So when we are talking about capabilities that KIM has, so there are four major ones, right? First of all, it builds a complete graph of your RBAC entities and how they connect, right? And then second, it's fully searchable, filterable. You can slice the data by verb, right? What action needs to be performed on what namespace, right? Or label, it depends. Right. Third, the visualization is interactive, so you can like zoom in, hover for context, or let's say trace privilege path, right? That is also possible. And lastly, it lets you save views. So if you have built a query to check for risky rules, right, you can reuse it again and again, and then export it and provide it to, let's say, your security team or compliance team, right, for audit purpose. And so yeah, talking about predefined, so these are like critical queries that we have. Let's say, so KIM also comes with, let's say, built-in key queries. So for common, let's say, high risk patterns, right, that is usually there. For example, you can see, you can find accounts with excessive permissions, or orphaned accounts, right, orphan bindings, or service accounts that are being not used, right, or which are also tied to any workload, right? We can also showcase that or see that, right, have a visibility over that. Then these queries are great starting point, right, for enforcing least privilege and spotting things that might otherwise go, let's say, unnoticed, right? You might not notice it. So that is one thing. And talking about use cases, right, I mean, this is the real thing. So when we are talking about use cases, I'll give you some examples. So maybe you need to delete, or let's say you need to know who can delete secrets in production, right? That might be one of a use case. It depends, or why a particular user has elevated access, or maybe it's audit time and you need to report. You need a report for all the high privilege rules, right? Which user has those rules, right? You need that so you can export it out, provide it to your compliance team, right? So KIM lets you like answer these in seconds, and even better, you can export the data for documentation, which I already talked about, right? So this is pretty much it, and we can talk about demo, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Nikhil, but before that,
Mm-hmm.
so for every security company out there, role based access control misconfiguration, let's say, are
Mm-hmm.
a top tier concern for everybody. So, how
Correct.
about we give the audience today maybe a live example on how KM actually helped preventing, or let's say, catch a very risky permission?
Right. So what I can do is I can share my screen and then take you through the live example, right? That will answer your question. So Hang on, I'll reshare my screen and we can then talk about it. Windows. Right. Is my screen visible?
Not yet. Yes,
Or
can see it now.
yeah. So this is our dashboard, right? You can customize it, of course, right? So first of all, the question comes in. Let's talk about first how you onboard for stuff, and then we'll go about the use case that Keithan asked about, right? So let's get to first. You go to settings, manage clusters, right? Onboard now, and you can just put some name here. For now, I'll just put test cluster, right? Then save next. So the onboarding part, first of all, the agent, there is no need to install any agents because the KIEM is agentless. You don't need to deploy any agent. What you need to provide is token, which you can generate from here, settings, and then tokens. Create a token here, put it here, right? KIM basically is a cron jobs that get scheduled. You can set a schedule time like for 9 hours, 30 minutes, and it will like schedule it based on that time, right? So you just put this command into your machine where you have Kubernetes deployed, right? Control plane, and then when you have onboarded stuff, right? Let's say your cluster, right? What you can do is go to the inventory part, clusters, to have a visibility of what all things it is giving you out to you, right? So I'll just select one which is currently active, right? So we have a lot of things, not just let's say KIM. We also have compliance checking for your cluster. We also have uh, cluster misconfiguration, right? CIS benchmarking based on the best practices, right? So you'll get an overview for all of those. Right. So since we are talking about KIM specifically, we'll talk about that. So you see, there are some like you will have a widget like for these are the asset. Let's say rule binding, service account, cluster rule. Right. These are the findings. How many findings we are having for these, and low and high. These are like severity. Right. And these are like some of the findings that we are having. Right. So if I want to have more visibility over that, I can just select view all. Right. See all the findings coming up here, right? And let's say these are some of the findings that is coming up. So let's say cluster admin, this is having this is cluster wide, right? This particular role, and it is on JProx cluster. Where you can also see the description coming up here. The interested access is there, right? For of course, admin will have that access, right? And then also solutions, what you should do, what is the best practice, right? Then second part, if you want to have let's say graphical visibility, right, that we were talking about. So let's say these are like graph a list view, but if you want a graph view, you can also have that. So let's say these are the namespaces, right? These are the service account, and then these are the, let's say, mounts, volume mounts that you're having over here. Now, let's say in Kirtana case, she mentioned like what are the key queries? Like essentially, that's what she asked. So we have some, let's say, key queries predefined to start with. Let's say service account with no workloads or excessive permissions. You can go through it as the, let's say, have that as a starting point. Then you can create your own custom rules, right? You can go about filtering it, let's say where the particular verb is, right? It contains all. So for our case, let's say I go with excessive permission, right? So I want to see what all service accounts are having excessive permission. So I can have visibility over that. I see there is a namespace issue system. I click on it, right? And I see this is the service account. These are the mounts and these are the rule bindings. If I want to see what are the rules inside the binding, I can also check that. So in this particular rule binding, we have this rule which is istio rule, right? And if I want to see this particular rule is attached to what all, let's say, resources, right? What all things you can do with these rules, that is also possible. Like you can get it or list it or watch it, right? And if you want a manifest file for this, that is also possible, right? And then copy it based on your need. Now, one of the use cases that we were talking about for compliance is that, let's say there is certain like you want to see unused rules, right? So you'll see these are some of the unused roles. You don't see any subject of these are basically service account, right? There is no role binding since it is not attached to any account, subject, right? You'll see that, and I'll see a list. I see these are the rules that is not being used. Right, that is an issue, right? You don't want something that is not being used because at some point of time it can come back to bite you, and you don't want that, of course. Right, you can either export it. Let's say I want to export these issues, right? That is also possible. And then further, let's say you want to create your own rules, we can go for that. So yeah, so you can filter it, add a group. Let's say I add a condition like where this particular role is, it contains, let's say, some certain value, or right, namespace that contains, right, we can put a namespace there, or like we can have is any of the namespace, right? So you get the freedom to select which filter, or let's say you have a flexibility, right, to see which all things you want to see, and you can of course apply it, save it, then export it, right? And then further, if there comes let's say compliance part, right, you can export it and then provide them the file itself, right? So this is pretty much it for KIM, and yeah.
Yeah. So this demo actually reminds me of, Nikhil, how compliance and governance also plays a major role, because since Kubernetes environments are extremely dynamic, like permission change, teams on board, off board often. So I think in a way KIM helps us ensure that there is always an updated phase of the current
Correct.
RBAC state, right? The ongoing visibility that we have just shown, which gives the security teams a little confidence that they're not only meeting compliance today, but they are maintaining constantly, like continuously, even as things
Right.
evolve. Yeah. So I just wanted to, ask one more question before we jump into the
Hmm.
audience questions. Like, let's say if a security breach occurs in any
Right.
Kubernetes cluster, when you're dealing with multi clusters, also, this is a very
Hmm.
common one. So, what tools or maybe logs that would you review to understand how access was gained or how you prevent similar breaches in the future? Because these are something that are
Right.
quite repetitive, and there are chances that it gets repeated. So,
So
how are
it
we going to
depends,
do
right?
that?
I mean, these the KIM especially, right, is just a preventive measure, right? So we also offer a lot of things, not just this KIM. Like I mentioned, we have cluster misconfiguration or CIS benchmarking, like, basically best practice, right, based on CIS compliance. Now, let's say if I want to have visibility of, let's say, breaches, right, logs that got generated, you can go for runtime protection, right? Because these are like preventive measures, and in some cases, I mean, not every tool is 100% secure, right? But in some cases, if it fails, you can have runtime protection over there at the end as a last layer of security, where it will monitor, let's say, all your let's say application behavior. And in case if any let's say anything that is outside the application behavior gets executed, you can directly block that. We directly block that. We don't let it execute there, right? That is what we can go for. And in case if someone tries to, let's say, violate a certain policy, or let's say run any excessive command there, right, you'll get an alert for that as well, which you can forward to any, let's say, CM tools as well. And one more thing I forgot to mention, let's say issues and findings, if we go there for specific to KIM findings, we can further automate it. Let's say you get all the findings coming up, right? You have a graphical view, you have all the findings coming in, right? But in case you want to automate these, right? Let's say if I have a certain finding coming up, I want to automate it to, let's say, a risk factor is high, right? I want to get tickets created automatically in case if there is a finding that comes up with risk factor high. We can do that. You can select a condition, we can select risk factor as high, select the data type for KIM, right? And whenever a scan happens based on what you have scheduled, right, the ticket should be created. You can change status, you can get notification, right? So in that cases, you can see, let's say, any excessive permissive rule was created, you can get an alert for that as well, right? So that is possible, right? So that is one use case I wanted to talk about, right? So yeah, this is pretty much it. And yeah, Keitana.
Yeah. So since we're at the end of the presentation, I just wanted to brush up everything that we've spoken so far. Right, there are other open source tools like you name it, like as
Correct.
kubectl
Correct.
or Pluto, right? So for KIEM, what will be the added edge, or let's say the top three things that one can achieve with KIEM that helps the security teams or any security companies
Right.
in general?
So right,
Top three
top
things.
three, I would say, first you have, let's say, freedom of selecting your, let's say, own queries. So you can, because usually kubectl YAML, it's very hard to manage all those rules, right? Because when you are dealing with production environment, as more users join in, let's say more members coming in your team, you create more rules, role bindings, more role bindings are there, right? So a lot of scaling of application is also there, so you have to deal with bulk of rules, right? To In order to do that, you need a visibility there, right? So first you'll have visibility. Second, for audit purpose, let's say you want to audit it, right, for particular compliance, you are adhering to certain compliance, and in case if the compliance team is asking for a proof for those, right, you can export these files, let's say for key queries that you have already created, you can save it, you can reuse it, export it, and then provide those export file to those compliance team, right? Then third part would be, of course, key queries that we provide, right? You can see some unused rules, excessive permission, this what we have already defined, right? Permission to list, network policies, these are like major issues, sometimes it can lead to one. So visibility over these key queries is also one major aspect that I would like to mention. So this is pretty much it.
Right. So thank you so much for joining us today. We have explored how KIM brings clarity to Kubernetes RBAC, which is a major
Right.
concern, and that helps uncover risky privileges, which supports compliance through saved queries, and ultimately give us security teams the confidence to manage any access at a scale. So, if you are interested in trying KIM in your own environment or want to deep dive into use cases specific to your team, we'd love to connect. So, feel free to reach out to us. We'll have the links dropping in the chat box here, right? You can book a demo with us. So, big thanks to Nikhil for the deep dive and to all of you for being here. And yeah,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you so
so
much,
much.
guys.